This is the hallway that leads you into our children's ministry area. This is where I hope I will see you very soon. We have been meeting here in the church and the Children's Center for many weeks now. And with that being said, at this time we are deciding that this is going to be the last video that we are posting for our children's ministry online, because we're meeting in person and we want all of our energy to go towards the excitement here in our Children's Center. So I hope that you will start coming and bringing your friends and your loved ones and just come and celebrate with us and have a lovely time.
Ships traveled a long distance across water. Pay for a place, but bring your own food. This is not a cruise.
Well, our story today I'm really excited about. It's called Shipwreck. And that seemed kind of funny. There is a game in Awanas that we have played called Shipwreck, and it is so much fun. Remember? Port, aft, starboard. Remember? Yeah. Fun game. Well, in this case, it's not a game. This is a real story. For over 2 years, Paul had been in jail. But now he was on his way to Rome to meet the Roman ruler Caesar. In Bible times, travel by ship was pretty common, but it was slow and it was hard, and people never knew when or if they would actually get to where they were going. Paul was with some of his friends other than prisoners, soldiers, and Julius was the Roman commander in charge of Paul. They all boarded into a very large ship, a total of 276 people. As soon as they left, strong winds blew in the wrong direction for the ship to go, which, if it's not, the wind's not blowing you, they didn't have a motor, it was just different back then. You know, the ship finally reached an area, a harbor called Fair Havens, and the sailors and the passengers were at least glad to be ashore, but the seasons were changing, and when the seasons change, it made it so much more difficult for them to travel via boat. So every day that they stayed, they knew there was the risk of bad weather, that it was going to grow and grow and grow and possibly be worse. Well, Paul warned Julius and the ship's captain to not leave because it would be dangerous, but the ship's captain, he disregarded that, and he said, you know what? Fair Havens is not a good place to stay. Julius should have listened to Paul, though, because you know what? Even though the captain seemed to be so sure that it was fine, they set off for the next harbor. And at first the sea was calm, but the gentle winds became great big gusts of wind. And if you've ever lived in Troutdale or been through Troutdale during the windy season, these wind gusts were bigger than that. Soon the ship was tossing from side to side, and those enormous waves began to crash against the wooden ship. The water came over the ship, and the powerful winds blew the ship farther and farther away from where they were going. The crew had to throw everything overboard. If the ship wasn't weighed down, less water would come on board. So if you think about it, the heavier it is, the ship sinks into the water a little bit more. So they took stuff out and threw it out so that the ship wouldn't be so deep into the water. But the ship still got thrown around and the storm still raged on. And you know, can you imagine how those passengers must have felt? They must have been terrified. We're all going to die, cried the sailors. Nothing's going to save us. In the middle of all of this panic, Paul stood up and he was calm. I warned you not to leave Fairhaven, he said. If you had listened to me, this would not have happened. But cheer up. I have good news. So I'm going to read Acts 27:22 through 25 to hear the good news that that Paul told to everyone. But take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night an angel of God came to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me, and he said, don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God, in his goodness, has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God. It will be just as he said. Wow. At midnight, the sailors discovered they were sailing into shallow water, and that means that the water's not so deep. Paul encouraged his shipmates to eat and not be afraid of what would happen, and God was going to take care of them. And soon they were all eating and feeling hopeful. Maybe we will make it after all, they may have said to each other. When it was fully light, the passengers and sailors saw that they were close to a sandy beach, and the passengers must have cheered. I know I would have. The captain ordered the sailors to head for shore. The sailors followed the captain's orders, and it seemed as though the ship was going to land safely on the beach, but then the bow of the ship, the front of it, hit a sandbar and it got stuck. And then the huge waves crashed and crashed and crashed against that stranded ship, and the ship began to break into pieces. One by one, everyone jumped from the ship into the cold, wild waves, and they found things that floated, and they grabbed hold, and then they floated or they swam toward the shore through the pounding waves. Finally, they dragged themselves up onto the beach of an island, and the ship was in pieces. The cargo was gone, but not one person had been lost, just as God had promised. Paul's encouraging words helped his fellow travelers through a difficult time, but they also helped them learn that they could trust God's amazing power. They now knew that God cared about them.
Isaiah 40:29. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Isaiah 40:29.